All right, good day to you. This is the Becoming Great podcast, a podcast where we explore topics like personal development and business. And we are becoming great ourselves, and in the meantime, we are building the organization Great.com, a company that will give away 100% of its profits to charity. And today I'm here with, as usual, the founder of Great, my good buddy, the aspiring Thai boxer, the professional dancer, he thinks, Eric Bergman. How are you?
Thank you. Far too kind. Actually not, you should say nicer things about me.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you a note next time with nice things to say about Eric, and we'll just make this sound totally genuine. And I'm here with my good friend Emil Eckwart, who is simply not such a good friend because he didn't say nice things about me. But he's really smart, but like evil genius smart, you know. He wants to destroy the world, wants to blow things up, and it's not actually nice on the inside.
I'm actually kind of jealous. They're tearing down a huge apartment building right next to me with one of these big bulldozer things. There's not a metal ball on it, but it could have been. And I always wanted to drive one of those things. It looks fun.
So you want to destroy things. That's what I've been seeing on your inside.
I do. And one other thing you need to know about me is that I am a minimalist, which means that my life is pretty special, I guess, compared to a lot of other people. It means that I'm waking up at the same time every day, always 6 in the morning, and I don't use an alarm clock. I have one bowl in my kitchen, and I use this for cereal, except for when I make my coffee, and I make it, classic brew style, where I just pour the water on the coffee myself. I have one spoon, one fork, I have one knife, and I sit on the floor. Because why would you need furniture? And actually, that's not really me. And if you look at the video, you can see all the books behind me. I did see this in a YouTube video
and
once.
The chair that you're sitting in.
Damn it! I hope you listen to this online. On audio, I mean. Well, I saw this in a YouTube video. And the guy made pretty much the same joke that I try to do right now. But afterwards he showed what a life of a minimalist really could look like. And then it turned out that it is actually not that different from the life that I live. And the way he explained it is that it's about choosing to say no to thoughts, behavior, and relationships that doesn't really add the most that they could do to your well-being. And I thought that was interesting. So, Eric, can you relate to this? And what is minimalism? What do you think of when you think of minimalism?
So we explored this together yesterday when we brought this topic up. And the first thing I see when I hear the word minimalism is this white poster, just a white background, and the black letters minimalism in Arial, like really big letters, and a dot in the end. That's like the first thing I see. And the second thing is like a very clean living room in some magazine where very small pieces of furniture, like Scandinavian design or something like that. And that was my only relationship to the word minimalism until you start exploring it like this. I was like, it's actually an interesting concept of like saying no to things and what that means and the importance of it. And I think it's after contemplating it a bit and thinking about it, I felt like, wow, this is something that benefits everyone. It's something worth thinking about in my life, in your life, but also in how we build the business of Great. So how can we explore this concept together? And I like what you said before, like saying no to things. Because I've heard the expression quite a few times that when you say yes to something, you say no to something else. And I haven't really thought about it that much.
What does that mean?
Basically, let's say you really want two things. You're having lunch and you really want the burger, but you also really want the pizza, obviously. And it's tricky to make up your mind, but then at the end of it, you say yes to the burger, which actually means that you're saying no to the pizza. So the yes is actually a no to something else. And this goes for everything in life. So if you really want to become a fireman, but you also really want to be a lawyer, then you can only say yes to one of these things, and you will automatically say no to something else. And it's one thing when you do this with things you really want to do, but it's quite often that we say yes to something that we might not really want to do, and we end up having to say no to something that we wanted to do more because we always promised our time somewhere else, or we might not even get the option of saying yes to something else because that didn't happen. So maybe we started studying right after school, we said yes to that, but that actually meant that we didn't start a company because we didn't even came across the person who wanted to be an entrepreneur and teach us because we were in school. So the concept then of whatever you say yes to means that you're saying no to a lot of things that you're not even aware of. And I think that was a very interesting way when I started contemplating what does this mean. Did that make sense? Because I haven't tried to explain it like this before.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. And I guess the idea is that it's beneficial to think of the consequences of agreeing to do something. So meaning if I agree to go and meet a friend, that just feels like something I do, but it also means that I'm saying no to other things I could do with that time.
Yeah.
Or if I just scroll on social media for an hour, that seems like it's just something that I do, but I'm also saying no to all of these things. It's just that it's a passive no.
Yeah, passive no. That's a good word. I haven't thought about that. But yeah, you're saying no without being aware of it, and that goes for everything. And I read this book like 2 years ago called Essentialism by someone named something. It's you can probably find it.
I love that guy.
Yeah, he's so cool. Someone named something. Yeah, Greg McEwen, I think, way like out there. And he called this essentialism, and I guess that's kind of what we're going for with minimalism here. And he mentioned a rule called the 90 points rule, and I think that's a very good way of applying this. And his logic was, if you keep saying yes to things that you're not super excited about, then you're never going to get to do anything you're super excited about, because there's so many things that you're going to be kind of excited about that it will fill up all your time in your schedule. So if you're instead asking yourself, whenever you're faced with a decision, what do I want to do? And say, okay, on a scale from 1 to 100, how excited am I about this? How much do I want to do this? And if it's below 90, then he says that you should say no, because there will be so many things that are 51. It might make sense to say yes to something that's 51, but there's so many things of like that you will end up doing just things that are slightly exciting, and then you will never come across these super exciting things. And it's also a good way of feeling, am I doing this for me, or am I doing this for someone else? So I could see. Yeah, this makes sense. Is this like a rule that you feel beneficial?
It makes sense. And one thing that I like about that rule is that if you only choose to do things that you really, really want to do, that are 9 or more exciting for you, that means that you're going to have fewer options. And I think there could be... So I also thought of minimalism as... having very few belongings, having very little furniture. But it could also be limiting yourself to just a few choices. And I remember reading somewhere that, if you go back to the hamburger and pizza analogy again, that if you're in a restaurant and you can only choose between hamburger and pizza, then whichever one you choose, you are going to be more satisfied with your choice compared to if you have 10 things in the menu. So less choice equals more happiness, whichever choice you pick.
Yeah, that's interesting.
If you go to a vacation, you can only go to Dubai, for example. You're going to enjoy that vacation more compared to if you could choose from 10 different places.
Now when you say it, I remember I read something like this about, when I was reading about the success of Apple. Like, one of the arguments that he made in that article was the reason why everyone has the iPhone, or so many people had the iPhone, is that there were only one iPhone. So you could go in and say, I want the iPhone. But if you wanted a Samsung, it was common that you walked into the stores like, okay, I want to buy this Android phone, and there were 100 different options.
Yeah.
And people just got overwhelmed of, I can't make up my mind. And then they went and got the iPhone.
That is the annoying thing about Android. There are so many phones.
Yeah, there are too many options.
Yeah.
And ironically, people are less satisfied with...
Yeah, and even if you
that.
pick the best Android option, you're going to be less satisfied with that choice because there are more options.
Yeah. That reminds me of another similar thing I watched. I haven't put these two together before, but there is a TED Talk called The Paradox of Choice. And they're elaborating on this specific thing where they're saying the more choices you have, the less happy you will be, basically. But it's a really good TED Talk, and we'll link to it below. But yeah, regardless, let's get back to this 90-point rule. And because me and my fiancée Johanna, we use this a lot together when we're trying to decide on things to do or not to do. And one thing came to mind that we did quite recently. We were supposed to go to England, and we had actually already bought the plane tickets. We had planned everything, and we were going. But when we got to the point where we were about to go to the trip, we were like, do we really want to do this? It's like, yeah, of course, we already bought the tickets. We already planned for this. It's like, yeah, but are we genuinely excited about this trip? Or are we more excited about being home? It's like, yeah, that's true. It's like, okay, so I asked her, on a scale from 1 to 100, how excited are you about this? And she's like, 60, maybe 70. And I'm like, and how excited are you to be home and do this and this thing that we were planning for? Like, we wanted to, like, yeah, that's more. So we decided not to go on this trip because it got so easy to see we're actually not that excited, but just because we bought the tickets, it's very common that we would have gone anyway. Right. And these were Ryanair flights for like 50 euros ahead, so it wasn't even a lot of money either, but just that we had made up our mind and planned to do it. But seeing this in a specific number, like this is only 60% exciting, made it a lot easier not to do it.
So you tapped into your true feelings instead of doing what's expected of you.
Yeah. And I got a number. So for me, at least, it made it easier to tap into my... It's one thing to say, it doesn't feel quite right, it doesn't feel perfect. But my mind is very number-oriented. So if I can say, yeah, but this is only 60, I've already made up my mind. I'm not doing things if they're not 90 or more.
I was with someone the other day, and I told her I'm 90% excited about doing this thing. I'm 90% excited right now. And she's like, you're so stupid. Who says that? Who is using a number for excitement? And I said, all right, I could have said, I'm very excited. But on a scale 1 to 100, how much is very excited for you? He's like, I don't know. Like, she's like, I don't know, 60? And I've asked these questions to many people, and I've gotten everything between 60 and 95. Some words are very vague. Like, I'm quite happy. Okay. What does that mean? These words just creates a illusion that we know what we mean, but we don't.
So we're being minimalistic and stop using words and start using numbers instead.
Numbers are awesome. I love numbers. But
1, 2, 5, 5, 5, 3, 5, 5. Trying to do a podcast with just numbers. Does it work?
It could work in some circles. I'm sure there's one out there. But if you're only doing things that you're excited about, 9 out of 10, what if you have to pay your bills or go to the dentist or do something really shitty? Are you just going to end up never doing those boring things?
Yeah, of course. It's going to give me a great life.
Unicorn.
The key here,
Unicorn life.
The key here is actually not, am I 1 to 100 excited? Is it 1 to 100 meaningful?
Cool.
Is this something that really makes sense for me to do? Because maybe you're not super excited to go see your grandmother or whatever it is, but it feels more than 90% meaningful to go there and be there for her. Or maybe you're not more than 90% excited about cleaning. But it's like, yeah, but this looks like a place where pigs live. So it's more than 90% meaningful to do it.
Right.
So meaningful is probably a better word for it, but
That
excited
makes
was a
sense.
better thing. So the same thing, if we really wanted to go to this trip, let's say there were things that felt really important to do there, people we have really, really promised, or whatever it might be, then it might still have been over 90% meaningful.
Got it. I guess the sweet spot for me when I make decision is the intersection between excitement and if something is healthy for me. I think that's a good sweet spot. Is this exciting? And in exciting, I have built-in meaning as well. And is it healthy? If it is, I do it.
Then you just go for it, regardless how scary it is.
Not always. Sometimes. On a good day.
You want to be the person who do it.
Yes.
On a good day. Yeah. Worth mentioning a little side note there that Emil is the kind of guy that walks up to girls on the subway and start talking to them even though he's horrified. And I think he's cray-cray, but he's also brave. So... But yeah, what's minimalism to you? Then outside of this 90-point rule, that is how it works in my head. What do you think when you see this?
Cool. I would like to share my introduction to minimalism that I didn't know was minimalism until yesterday when you and I talked about this. And that is the first book that I read that I found very, very, very meaningful for me. And this is the kind of book I think you can either be ready for it and it will give you a lot of benefit, or you won't be ready for it, or you won't be in a place in your life where you need it, and then it will be completely useless. And we have both read this, me and Eric.
Side note, it was completely useless for me the first time I read it, and it's still... Now it's meaningful, but too heavy to read.
Right.
So...
Right. This book is written by a guy called Eckhart Tolle. So he's a tiny German guy and he's a spiritual teacher. And what he's teaching is all about the ego and how the ego works. And I read this book when I was about 24.
When you say ego, what do you mean?
Ego, okay. So it's the voice in your head that is always thinking about the future or the past, or that is complaining, or that is using repetitive thoughts. Does that make sense?
Well, as much sense as it can make. I think it's a tricky concept. But yeah, so basically, the voice that I'm thinking about as my thoughts. So my thoughts, basically.
Well, I think your thoughts can come from the true core of who you are as well. This gets a little bit spiritual now. But I think there is a pure version of you, and then there is a version of you that have been conditioned by the past, or that might be stressed. Basically, you know, when you're having a pretty shitty day, that could be the voice of the ego in your head. My favorite definition of ego, and this is for the connoisseur of these topics.
The nerds of ego.
The nerds of these topics is the ego is the imagined voice of an overstimulated nervous system.
Yeah, you lost me. That flew straight over my head.
It was meant to do it, but maybe someone listening would like that definition.
You just wanted to show off.
Yes.
Okay, we sidetracked a bit here. Keep going with Eckhart Tolle.
So this is a book about spirituality, and you don't need to be spiritual to read it. It just basically walks through you in each chapter how the ego works, how the mind works, and how it might not always be beneficial for you. And when I read this, I had never gotten in contact with anything like this before. And I realized that something absurd, like 95% of my thoughts that I had in my head were either repetitive, just repeating unnecessary things that weren't helping me. They were thoughts about the future or the past. And there is a point to planning and reminiscing, of course, but when it's happening all the time, in a repetitive, unproductive way, that can be very detrimental, I think. And realizing that, there are like 3% of my thoughts that is actually useful here. What would happen if I started to remove some of the thoughts that weren't, what would happen then?
What kind of thoughts were that? What repetitive thoughts did you have that weren't beneficial?
Okay, that would be something like, I'm worrying that this thing is gonna happen. I didn't like that this thing happened before. I don't like this person. I don't like this thing. If this thing happened, I would be happier.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to those, especially the last thing.
Yeah.
Like, if only. And then, so basically...
It was your fault.
If only, if
I don't
only
like this.
Yeah.
I like this. That's gratitude. That's okay.
Okay, so basically, let's take the thought of, if only this happened, I would feel better. And then just by thinking that, it makes me feel worse in a sense. Because I'm feeling the lack of what I don't have.
Yes, and you
And
are holding your
that.
happiness hostage to some imagined place in the future where you or your ego imagine that better circumstances will finally give you the well-being that you desire.
That was a complicated sentence as well, but I like the hostage part. Holding your happiness hostage. That's clear. It's kind of, I can see a picture in my head of my happiness sitting in a little cage somewhere on a deserted island, just waiting for me to show up to this paradise island and releasing the happiness.
Yeah.
So as long as my thoughts are like that, my happiness, which by the way looks like a little sunny cloud. Imagine a cloud, but it's the sun. That's the way the happiness looks in my head apparently, and it's got a smiley face.
And the trick.
So yeah.
And the trick that ego plays is that if I only can get to this paradise island with the coconuts and the Hawaiian bikini girls waving a palm tree over you, then I
forgot to mention those.
Then all of a sudden I will feel much better. Not realizing that when you get there, your ego will still have 97% unnecessary thoughts. Why is the sand so hot? When do I get home? I want to work. This is boring. I wish there was more bikini girls here. So it's the condition, right? And something inside me when I read that book said, imagine if these thoughts aren't here. And in the beginning I started hating myself when I had these thoughts. So it became a very non-nice way of dealing with it. But I think over time I learned using things like meditation and practicing letting thoughts go that wasn't serving me. I started to have less of those thoughts. And that, in my experience, created space. And in the space, which meaning it's not filled of unnecessary things, more and more of these nice thoughts, these creative thoughts, could come up. So being minimalistic in your mind, choosing only the thoughts that you like the most, being good at that kind of minimalism can be very beneficial to me for creativity. Coming up with new and interesting and good and productive ideas.
Okay, so let's see if I can make sense of this in my head. Basically what you're saying that in the beginning there is 97% crappy things and 3% good things. And by not being aware of that the 97% is crappy, you keep repeating it over and over and over and over again, and there isn't really much space for the 3 good percent.
Exactly.
But once you learn how to let go of those crappy things and not repeating the same thought over and over and over again, then suddenly it becomes a vacuum or whatever, and you feel more of the positive thoughts. So we could argue that, and this is just a theory that I'm making up in my head right now, that the negative patterns are stronger than the positive patterns, and that's why they kind of push the other things away. And once there are less of the negative, there gets much more space for the positive.
I think that's a very, very well summary. In my experience, I'm not sure if they were stronger. I actually think positive thoughts are more strong. They were more habitual. I had been doing it for my entire life. And not everyone is going to be that skewed towards negativity. But I was that at the point in my life when I find this book. And I think that is exactly why I found it so meaningful. And if you're not in that place, it might not be that useful.
Okay. Yeah, because I read it and it flew right above my head. So I didn't understand anything when I read that book the first time. Yeah, no, that's not true. So I read the book and it's a heavy read. I recommend it still, but it's a heavy read. And I felt like 10% of the book was brilliant and 90% of the book was nonsense. So it was either really, really good or I felt that it was really, really stupid. And this made me question my own intelligence in a sense, or my own perspective. Like, if 10% is brilliant and 90% feels like bullshit and nothing is in between, maybe it's just me who don't understand the 90 good percent.
That's some high-level insight still. I like it. And to clarify, I still think this is a very good book. I think it's timeless. It's called A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. But the point of this rant is not to read that specific book. I think you can get to the very same effect through meditation, through practicing communication, or just personal development in general. And learning to choose thoughts that work for you, thoughts that are the most productive, and not continuing to think about the other negative stuff. Because in my head, I still have unnecessary thoughts all the time. Sometimes when I sit down and meditate, I hear that. Did you see Monty Python, that lumberjack song? He's a lumberjack and he's okay. He sleeps all night and he works all day. And
that's not a necessary thought, you mean?
I look present on the outside, but that's what's going on inside. But the idea, I don't need to keep singing that song for the whole meditation practice, right? And the practice is about getting back to present, even though that song is there.
I love the mix of meditation and Monty Python. I think a lot of people, including myself, thinking about meditation is like someone feeling sacred with their hands high up, just home. And in your head it's like, hey boy, get your rocks off you, boy.
Yeah, you're in a China, it's like, you think you're spiritual and you're taking this very seriously, don't you? I'm gonna ruin your meditation session.
Yeah.
All right.
Minimalistic meditation.
So, would you like to summarize the idea that you already kind of did? But.
Yeah, I kind of did. I could re-summarize it really quickly.
Yeah.
Anyway, the main thing that I take with me from this is we're having a lot of thoughts that doesn't add value, and we tend to repeat them, and they might even be negative for us.
Yeah.
And a big one there is, if I only had this, I would be happy.
Yeah.
And it gives us an excuse not to be happy today.
Yeah.
And if we become aware of that and we can practice looking at that, this is just a thought, it's not necessarily the truth, it's just something popping up in my head, and that's fine. It will be easier to think of the positive things and actually be happy in the moment.
That is exactly right. And before moving on, I would like to add one more thing that I think is interesting with this kind of topics. And you might be listening and might think a kind of mindful life is very interesting, or you might think this is very boring. But just try this. Try this for a week or so and see if it changes anything. And that is, instead of choosing something, what if you choose nothing? You choose the space. So now imagine that you are going up an elevator and you press the elevator button. My previous conditioned mind would be thinking about, what am I going to do when I get up in the apartment? Or what am I going to do tomorrow? Or I bring my phone up and look at Instagram, right? But what if I choose to just not think about anything? I just stand there, or I experience sense perception. Maybe I'm looking at the elevator, or I'm feeling my body or feeling the breath. And this might sound totally hippie to you, but if you are valuing creativity and getting new ideas, if you can find a way to create space for yourself where your mind isn't filled with thought clutter, look and see if more of those ideas drop in. Just try it. Try it.
I love the connection to creativity there. It's the same thing. So you give more space to positive thinking, but you also give more space for creative thinking.
Yes. I choose nothingness often. So I think this is one of the biggest benefits of Eckhart's book, is that he's talking about when you walk up a stair, just focus on that experience. Or when I'm on a walk, just focus on the experience instead of being lost in thoughts. And when there's space, good things will just naturally drop in more often, in my experience.
Yeah. Yeah. If I'm sitting and watching TV, I'm rarely gonna come up with any brilliant ideas. But if I sit quiet or just take a walk quietly, then my mind is likely to come up with much better things because there is space.
For sure.
Yeah, I can see that.
All right. I'm ready to close this loop and move on. Is that fine with you?
That sounds perfect.
All right, because while reaching enlightenment and choosing not to go on journeys to London, we're also building a company, right? And how would you say minimalism is valuable when building a company? Are we minimalistic and great?
So I've been thinking about this and I've been kind of taking pride in focus, and that focus could translate to another word for minimalism. And then I started asking myself this question yesterday: are we minimalistic and great? And what would being really minimalistic and great mean? So the logic with great is, first and foremost, we want to make money and give it away. That's the key element of great, I would say. And then there is a lot of other things around that. But if we're super, super minimalistic, that's the only thing we would do. And then I asked myself, what wouldn't we do? And for example, we probably wouldn't run a podcast. It's not the very minimalistic thing. We're not making money from this. We're learning things that maybe will make us money in the future or maybe help us in one other way. And we're having a lot of fun. And the fun and the learning part is key here. But it's not very minimalistic. And at the same time, we have chosen not to have offices. Instead, we're sitting everywhere. You're sitting in your living room. I'm in my little teeny tiny home office right now. And that is a very minimalistic approach. And it saves us money. It gives us focus. It's good in many ways. So I can see us being a lot less minimalistic than we could be. And I believe it's most of the time it's a good thing. But I don't know. And one of the things that I've seen great doing 4 different businesses or legs of their business, and I've started questioning if that's the optimal way of doing. So to sum that up quickly, we want to have one commercial leg that will make money. It's going to be casino marketing. One part of the site where we will compare charities and give the best experience to where you can donate money. One that will be about how to build an organization in whatever way we want to do it and what we learn from it. And one that is supposed to be inspirational and teaching things that we believe are valuable that are not taught in school. And looking at this once again, it's a very unminimalistic approach. We're trying to do 4 things when most businesses do 1. So this made me question, and I haven't reached any conclusions on this, is this really the right way to do? Or are we screwing ourselves up here? Would it make sense to take 1, 2, or maybe even 3 things away from this to be minimalistic and focus and be able to really do it well? Or is it a good idea to do all 4? And I think this has been the biggest insight for me from starting this conversation that we had yesterday, is this question then. Is great trying to do too many things, and it might end up with us not managing to do anything properly just because of this.
So
what's your thoughts?
So you think that is the biggest risk then? Do you think the biggest risk is that we won't be able to handle that many tasks, or do you think the biggest risk is that our customers will be confused what we're actually doing? So let's say we want to do a really good charity product, then that might be tainted by the casino product. Or we want to do personal development stuff, and that might be tainted by the casino product, for example. And the other way around.
I would say both. So if we go back to the analogy of the pizza and the hamburger. So basically now we're saying yes to both. And that might mean that we're not really giving our full attention to the hamburger or our full attention to the pizzas. We're not really enjoying it. We're trying to eat both, and it's gonna be hard. And it also means that all the time that we spend on, so let's say we're doing 4 things and we're doing them equally. So spending 25% of our time on each project. it means that we're not spending 75% of the time on one thing. So if we were to spend 100% of our focus on one thing, it's much more likely that that thing would be really, really good. And now we're going to try to do 4 things with 25% of our potential. So it's basically, we're not just saying yes to the pizza and the burger, we're also saying yes to the salad and the pasta. And now we're going to try to enjoy our lunch, and we want to eat all of them because that's the idea. And it's going to be hard. It might be the best option to eat all of them. We might get really fat, but it might be the thing that is the most beneficial. But it's not sure. And I think that this is a very easy trap to fall into, being an entrepreneur running a business, because there are so many good ideas out there.
Yeah.
You want to launch so many Samsung phones because it makes sense, you think, but then at the end of the day, you're cluttering things up. So personally, I think this is the biggest risk, that we're losing some of the focus. And if we're doing one thing really well, or doing 2 things half as well as the first thing, or 3 things 1/3 as well, all of them, or 4 things 25% as well as potentially could be, then that's a tricky thing to say. I think that there is a reason why there isn't one single professional football player in Champions League that's also playing in the NHL hockey. Because you can't. You will lose focus. And it's a similar thing here. And yes, I think that's the biggest risk. But it's also the risk then of the visitor not getting confused and seeing the same thing. What am I going here for?
So let's stay on the first risk, and then we go switch to this, so we're not opening too many loops.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are worried now that if we are creating 4 products, our focus will be split. So one way I can see to prevent that then would be if we create almost like 4 different companies. So it's 4 companies in one. So we would need to have 4 times as many employees, 4 times as high costs maybe. So would that be a way to get around that? And is that even reasonable? Or would we have to water down the quality?
This goes down to one thing, and I'm gonna sound like a complete douchebag right now, but one thing we can't create 4 of is me. And I realize, as the founder of this and as the founder of businesses before, is that I'm exceptionally important to this project. Right now, if I went away, the project would go away. And in theory, we could create 4 of pretty much everything else. But we will not be able to have 4 founders and 4 me, and that means that my time is always going to be limited. And maybe we could scale up a lot of that. Maybe I'm not as important a couple of years from now. But going there, I will be. In the start phase, I will always be very important. And every time I spend my time in the start phase on something new, that's things that wouldn't happen here.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because no one is going to, I guess, care about and know the business as well as you do, at least in the beginning. And you can't put all of your focus on all of these different 4 projects. If you were only building a casino product, not doing the podcasting, not doing all of these other things, obviously that project would move forward a lot quicker.
Yeah. If I only wanted to be a football player, I'm going to be a better football player than if I want to be a hockey player as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and still it might be the right thing to do all 4, but I can also see it being a trap that's easy to fall into, especially wanting to start up all of them at once.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's that part of it. The other part of it is, as you mentioned, what will the visitor think? How confusing is this? And we could take that. So casino and charity are, I still want to do both of those things, just to clarify that. But let's just play with the idea of it, is more or less as far away as you can come from each other. That would be like having a store that sells spaceships and as well strawberry plants. It would be they're quite far away from each other on the spectrum. And it would be tricky to know, if you're coming in as a client, should I spend €1 on a strawberry plant, or €1 billion on that spaceship. And it's not going to really make sense to anyone. It maybe doesn't have to. Maybe you will sell shitloads of spaceships from impulse buyers that came for strawberries. Or maybe the people who want to buy spaceships instead buy 1 billion strawberry plants. Not my best moment of analysis.
I like this analogy. I want to use this again.
I can see the sign. It's a big spaceship like SpaceX, and then there are strawberries everywhere. See, it's logic. The strawberry ship.
Strawberry spaceships. Incorporated.
It's a thing. No, so it makes sense that people will get confused. What would you put in the TV commercial? What would you name the brand? What would you? Yeah, well, you said strawberry spaceship, so that's more subtle.
It's a great brand.
Space strawberries. Yeah, but it's the same thing here. It will create confusion. So the product will be less good. That's because we spend less time on a specific thing. And at the same time, it will be confusing for the client. So a minimalistic approach, and maybe the best approach would be to do just one thing. Maybe it's not. So this is where it's worth questioning the bigger picture and all of these things as well. Maybe there are enough synergies for this that it actually makes sense anyway. But I'm less convinced today than I were 2 days ago.
Yeah. So imagine now that there's a young entrepreneur listening to this podcast, and when you are young, maybe you have created some space in your mind like I hadn't. There will be a lot of good ideas in there, and there might be 3-4 different things I want to do. Might be 3 or 4 different areas that I want to learn about, maybe even more. So what would you say to someone that is 18 and have a lot of ideas?
I would say try lots of them. So one thing that I believe is that if you have lots of ideas, but you haven't figured out which one that really works or which one you really like, do them all. Or do lots of them. And kill the projects early. So give it a try. Do I want to be a lawyer? Do I want to go into medicine? Do I want to do this? Maybe you don't start the actual practice, but you read a book on each topic. Or if you want to run different companies, maybe you want to sell underwear. Give that a little try, but be willing to kill the idea quickly. Or maybe you want to be an accountant. See what is that like.
But shouldn't you try to stick into something that doesn't feel good in the beginning? Like I tried to play the piano once, and it hurt my head trying to get the chords right. It was really difficult in the beginning.
Yeah, and did you keep doing it?
No, it hurt my head.
Did you ever learn?
It hurt my
head. Personally, no, I don't believe that. I think that if there isn't at least passion in the early stage, what's the reason to think that there will be passion in the later stage?
That is true. I mean, I remember you and I were in LA and we tried salsa dancing. None of us had ever tried dancing before. And the lesson was very difficult for both of us. Both of us got headache. And you loved it and I hated it.
Yeah. And who's a dancer now?
Eric is a dancer.
I'm a dancer. Yeah, so this is what I'm saying. I think first trying to see, am I passionate about this? And if you love something and it's still really hard to make money from it or really hard to turn it into a business idea, at least you love it. Then it makes a lot of sense. You can do it for the pure joy of doing it, and then you'll figure other things out. But if you find out, I do not love this, it does not make sense, it was just the happiness idea that I had in my head speaking about before, I thought I would be happy if I did this. So I locked up my happiness on that island in that little cage, thinking that if I would only start this company, I would be happy. But then if you just try, it's like, oh, that's not the road to happiness. I need to try somewhere else. But on the other hand, let's say you have chosen one of these ideas. You have started your company and you're selling toothpicks. You love selling toothpicks and it's actually doing well. And then it's very easy to think, oh, I should also go into plastic cutlery, like forks and knives, because my clients want to buy that as well. But the thing is, you might be really, really good at toothpicks and it's a very simple product. But every moment that you spend on developing the new product is a moment that you're not spending on getting more restaurants to buy your toothpicks. Where you're already making money, you already know the business, you're already doing all of these things. So you're probably going to be better off focusing on becoming the number one toothpick in the world rather than getting into something else. And that's then from a pure business perspective. Maybe that's not how you find the most joy. But if the question is, where will I make the most difference? Or how will I make the most money, which is a common question to ask, it's probably to stick with what you know if you've found something that works and that you're passionate about.
I think that's a very practical and I like that answer. So try a lot of different things. If you find something that works and that you love, stick with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, do you want to add something to that, or can we move on?
I think we're running a bit short on time.
I was just about to say that I'm worried that this would be too long, and we talked about discussing relationships as well. But I think we're better off closing this episode.
Yeah, and we'll just leave the big cliffhanger of saying that we have a lot of other brilliant stuff to talk about on this topic.
We do.
But it will be some other day.
Ooh, exciting! All right. And do you have something to say goodbye before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I'd like just to add with the elevator challenge that you mentioned before.
Yeah.
You who are listening, feel free to do it. I think it's very beneficial to do. And please send us an email to podcast@great.com and tell us how it went. And we will be more than happy to share some sneak peeks of what we wanted to talk about more in this episode with you.
Yay! All right, you did the outro for me. I'm just gonna stop speaking now.
Yeah, you should. Goodbye.
Goodbye!